Good morning and welcome to Kunsang Payo Chuling. We are, as always, so happy to be here and to share teachings by Jetsunma, Ahkon, Lhamo. This morning's teaching is part 2 of the teaching that began on Wednesday evening. The title is How to Reach Enlightenment, and you'll be able to watch both of them on YouTube together. So, if you missed the one on Wednesday, you'll be just fine. So here we go. And
maybe it moves us. Maybe we feel like it's unbearable. I've been making myself watch CNN practically all day, a lot. And I find that the condition of the world is unbearable. It is unbearable to see that kind of suffering. So we see in this world alone, what the Buddha said about samsara is true. The suffering is all pervasive. Even if we just look at the human condition, this suffering is all pervasive. It never ends. And that's only humans. What about the condition of animals who are killed for their meat or their skin or their pearls like oysters? What about the conditions of animals that are forced to work all day long? They didn't apply for that job. No workman's comp when they break down either. So the condition of animals is terrible. You think, oh, well, I have animals and I take good care of them. Well, that's your animals, but in the realm of the animal kingdom, there is terrible fear and terrible suffering of all kinds. So the Buddha talked about the animal realm and he talked about the human realm, and he was right on both accounts. So we have to think that the other teachings that the Buddha has given about the rest of cyclic existence, the form and formless beings that are so many in number and so many in kind that we can't even conceptualize what they are. That in every one of these realms there is so much suffering. It is all pervasive. So that is the reality that we are being taught by the Buddha. Now what that gives us is the opportunity to make decisions that we couldn't make unless we had that information. Because that information, although sad to hear and sad to face, it really is sad. I mean, I watch CNN and I cry. It's not like we're emotionally immune. So to watch this kind of thing is very, very sad, but what is the benefit? What does it give us? Well, I would say empowerment. A kind of natural empowerment that tells us we cannot just stand still. That if we have the strength to help or the strength to do in some way, perhaps this is the time. And it makes us feel that we'd like to do something, that we'd like to help. That we yearn to be able to solve these problems. And ultimately, studying the faults of cyclic existence give us the confidence and the courage and the strength to practice our path for the liberation and salvation of all beings. So, having seen the suffering of the world and understanding that even only what I can see shows me that indeed suffering is all pervasive, and that while we spend our lives in endless distraction, accumulating and doing and busy, at the end of it, the sadness and the heartbreak is that we discover we haven't really accomplished what a noble human life could have accomplished. Maybe we have engaged in hatred. Maybe thinking we were right, we engaged in anger and hatred and judgment of others. Maybe thinking we were superior, we engaged in prejudice and bigotry and that sort of thing. And maybe ultimate selfishness, and maybe terrible compulsions, and yet we've accumulated lots of money in the bank, so it must be okay. At the end of our lives, these things face us, and we face them. So I'd like to face them before the end of my life. I'd like to think about this now. When we contemplate on these things, we do feel, hopefully, if we contemplate well, some kind of motivation. Realizing that all sentient beings are suffering, we also realize that, according to the Buddha, all sentient beings are the same as us in their nature. That literally my nature is the same as your nature, inseparable, indistinguishable. One is not more or better or bigger than the other. It is the same nature. And our nature is also that nature which results in animals, and in even the meanest, lowest cockroach has within them that spark of Buddha seed. So all sentient beings are the same, and we have one other thing in common, and that is that we're trying to be happy. We're all trying to be happy. We think that we have different ideas about what makes happiness, but we are all trying to be happy. Even somebody that's a serial killer is trying to be happy, believe it or not. In their sick, twisted way, that feeling of excitement or whatever weird feeling they get from that kind of control over someone else's life, in their misguided, turned around minds, they think that's happiness. They think that's what they need. How tragic. How amazing that there was so little understanding of what happiness is and of what the causes of suffering are, that while each and every one of us has the same capacity, and every one of us is equally trying to be happy, some of us might make these terrible mistakes, mistaking happiness for something awful. And that's the other part of the suffering of cyclic existence, that while each and every one of us wants very much to be happy and are striving for happy very, very effortfully, strenuously, we try every day, yet none of us really knows how to be happy. None of us really knows what causes happiness. Any appearance in phenomenal reality has a seed cause. Happiness has a seed cause. If we don't create the causes for happiness, the fruit of happiness will not appear. But not having been taught that, we truly do not understand, and we spend our energy in this endless kind of busy tornado, trying to milk some happiness out of this situation. Well, the Buddha teaches us that the causes for happiness are different than we might have thought. It's not a car, it's not a house, It's not a husband or a wife. It's not a family. All those things are great. I hope you have them. I hope you have millions of them. Well, not families, but you know, cars. They're all great, and I hope you have everything that you want, but these are not the causes of happiness. You know yourself, if you've ever gotten a brand new car, how you feel high on life for about a week, 2 weeks maybe, especially if it's a red convertible. I did that. I got a red convertible. That was my midlife crisis car, and I love it. And it made me happy for 48 hours. And then I just realized it was a car, you know? And then it got its first ding. And then I realized it was a car. So we all go through this, and we all get this kind of punch, and then we lose it, and we don't understand what's happened unless we have some kind of training. Now, the Buddha teaches us that the causes for suffering are non-virtuous habitual tendencies. Oh, and you think, oh, well, that's new. If I'm a bad girl, I'll get spanked. Like I haven't heard that before. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that whatever appearance or display one sees in phenomenal reality has a root cause. There is a full equation happening here. This equals this. The seed is the same as the fruit. Apple seeds, apple fruits. Right? Pear seeds, pear fruits. Apple seeds, cantaloupe fruits? No. Apple, apple. The seed and the fruit are exactly the same. Now this may sound like, oh wow, she thinks we're really stupid. But we don't act like we understand this. The Buddha teaches us that in order to create prosperity, in order to have, you know, what you need, and to not be worried about being hungry, and to have enough, you know, just plenty, and not be stressed out by poverty. If that's the case, and if that's your reality, then most likely in the past, you were generous. You were giving. And so having planted that seed of generosity, the fruit of prosperity and abundance appears. Unfortunately, if we don't remember having been generous, if it was like 10 lifetimes ago or something like that, we may not understand that that's where that prosperity comes from. And we may think, great, I'm cool, I'm bad, I got money, and I'm going to get more. And that would be a shame. That would be a shame. Because the seed that provided for that abundance is no longer being planted. My experience has also been, and this is something I've directly seen, talk about instant karma. I have seen that at times in my life where the money became short, I started giving stuff away. And I'd give stuff away to where I give everything away. And lo and behold, the cycle breaks. And any time I find that the flow is interrupted, that the cyclic flow is interrupted, I look into my mind to see where I'm being not generous, where I'm being closed and ungiving. And I try to remedy it. And even if I think, well, I'm doing the best I can, I think, well, in some previous life, there must have been some fault. And so now I'm going to do double time in generosity. And I found out that while it looks like I'm giving away all my stuff, and it looks like I might be poorer than ever, it never happens that way. It never happens that way. As soon as I apply the antidote, the problem becomes solved. That has been my experience. And I feel like I can teach you that because I've seen it work. I've really seen it work. So, understanding that the seed and the fruit are consistent, and that cyclic existence is naturally flawed in such a way that you really can't collect anything here that is material and take it with you. Well, what's a girl to do? How should we practice? How should we live? The Buddha teaches us that if we plant virtuous seeds of good conduct, generosity, of making offerings, of mindfulness, of prayerfulness, of contemplativeness, that these seeds will eventually provide fruit, the fruit of realization, the fruit of awakening. And that all of the different aspects of the path really rest on two legs. And that is the accumulation of wisdom and the accumulation of knowledge. And that not only do we have to be knowledgeable about the cause and effect relationships that comprise the experience that we have and make the world that we live in, but that somehow we also have to give rise to wisdom, which is the realization of the emptiness of self-nature and of all phenomena, the non-clingingness. That is the way to practice. And in order to practice in that way, again, we have to be motivated. And that motivation is the contemplation of the faults of cyclic existence. So when we practice in that way, the Buddha teaches us once again that to give rise to this awareness, one also must give rise to the bodhicitta. One has to study and contemplate on and give rise to the bodhicitta. What is that all about? Okay, explain this bodhicitta exactly. I mean, I keep throwing around this word and it sounds really cool, but what does it exactly mean? Well, it would take more time than I have here, I think, but I'll give it a shot. First of all, once again, the bodhicitta is the very display of enlightenment. It is the very display of the Buddha nature. If you can imagine the Buddha nature in appearance form, if you could imagine that primordial wisdom, uncontrived view in a display form, it would be the bodhicitta. In the same way that the sun displays itself in its rays, and its rays, although its rays touch and reach everything, they may not be in themselves visible, but they are absolutely there and completely inseparable from the sun, and are part of the reality of the sun and how it reaches what it reaches. So it's a decent analogy, it works. You can think about the bodhicitta in that way. But in truth, the bodhicitta has two main characteristics or qualities, or there are two kinds, you could say, of bodhicitta that one can practice. They are like the two eyes or the two legs of one's practice. They have to be brought into fruition identically, in balance, the same. You can't do one without the other. Both elements of bodhicitta have to be practiced. And it goes like this. There is what we call ordinary bodhicitta. It is ordinary, it is, what is the word I'm looking for? What is that word? Huh? Common, yeah. There was another word. No. Relative. Well, no, there's another one. I can't think of it. I have another word. I use it all the time, and I can't think of it. There's ordinary bodhicitta that is like common. And what makes it ordinary is that it's accomplishable with what we have as human beings in samsara. Ordinary bodhicitta is compassion or kindness that can be solved or that arises from our samsaric experience. Can you understand what that means? What that means is this. Let's say you're hungry and I feed you. That's compassion. That's a kind thing to do. But it's ordinary because your hunger arose from a samsaric body and the means to feed you arose from ordinary food, samsaric food that we found in this world. So that equation is understood to be just common, ordinary, unexceptional. Mundane, that's it. That's the word. It is mundane. Let's take another example of that. Let's say suddenly I became very rich. We're talking rich beyond anything you can believe, to where I could, if I took my money, let's say I could feed everybody that was hungry. All the people in Kosovo and all the third world countries where there is all kinds of poverty and so forth. Let's say anyone that was needful or hungry, I could pay for them to eat for the rest of their lives. Let's say I was that rich, and I did so. And beyond that, let's say I was rich enough also to get each and every person who was sick some medical care for the rest of their lives. That would seem like, if I had that money and I did that, and I solved that many of the world's problems, don't you think that would be an extraordinary thing to do? But actually, that is considered mundane or ordinary bodhicitta. Because I would only be solving the needs of people in this world, and I could only solve their temporary needs, their impermanent needs. Even if I could feed and care for these beings until the end of their lives, how can I follow them into the bardo state? My money won't do that. How can I enable them to gather together the necessary virtuous qualities in order to have a happy life in the future so that they won't be poor again? How can I teach them how to plant the seeds so that in their next life they don't just have the same reality come up, because the karma's still there. Now, even if I had that much money and I could feed, house, and give medicine to these beings from now until the time of their death, that is simply an ordinary or mundane capacity. Now, if you have that kind of money, I invite you to save the world. And I'm serious about that. If we have the capacity to help, we should always do so. The practice of this mundane or ordinary bodhicitta is absolutely necessary. It is part of our practice and our responsibility. But there is also something called supreme or extraordinary or ultimate bodhicitta. And what is that bodhicitta? Well, it's the bodhicitta that I decided I needed to have when my little sons, my sons are bigger than God now, when my sons were born and they were just babies. When they were little guys, I remember being so moved with the whole motherhood thing. Oh, just to hold that baby in my arms, I remember thinking there was this wound in my chest, it was just this big opening. I just couldn't, I was just, well, you know how you get when you're a new mother, you're all juicy and stuff. And I was in love with my children. I was just in love with them. I couldn't think about much else, really. I just cherished them. And I remember being all emotional about this, and I held my little baby in my arms, and I said, wherever you go, whatever happens, I will always be there for you. I will always comfort you and make sure that you have everything you need. I would never let you down. I would never let you down. And then I realized that I was lying. Because if my child were to die right now, unless I had accomplished something beyond ordinary bodhicitta, there's nothing I could do. If my child were to enter into another life, a life of suffering, I would be unable to help this baby. And here I was promising him that I would always be there for him. It occurred to me that something wasn't right there. And it made me feel even more dedicated to practicing this ultimate or extraordinary bodhicitta, because eventually it came to me that it's not only just about my sons or my daughter. It's that this is true of all sentient beings. Unless I were to really practice and accomplish the Buddha Dharma, unless I were to really practice and give rise to the bodhicitta, I could not look any of you square in the eye and say, I will not abandon you. And I wanted that. I want that so much. I want to be able to be of benefit to sentient beings. I want this suffering to stop. So I realized that this was a situation that needed remedying. And then I met up with the Buddha Dharma, and I began to study the activity of the bodhisattvas. That the bodhisattvas, through their compassion and through the excellence of their practice, return again and again and again in whatever form is necessary in order to lead others out of suffering. And I said, yeah, that's it. That's what I want. That's the way to spend one's life. That's what I call a noble human existence. So I felt very motivated. And I was fortunate that I went through things in exactly that way, in a very Western, kind of natural way. It just all made sense to me, because I feel like now I can explain it to you, and I can explain it in a way that's more reachable, more relevant in our culture. This extraordinary ultimate bodhicitta is that level of practice, that level of wisdom and awareness that we gain through our practice, that allows us not only to take the bodhisattva vow, as we took yesterday, but to fulfill the bodhisattva vow. To actually be in a position spiritually to be able to return consciously for the sake of sentient beings, to know that once I had formed a relationship with any being, that I could return for them in some way and maybe teach them and maybe help them out of their suffering, that I could make that decision. That to me was the only way to practice and the only thing that made sense. It only makes sense when you realize that in truth, when we realize ultimately and awaken fully the way the Buddha has realized, we know that we are not separate. That I simply cannot be free without you. And so I have found it to be very worthy to practice this ultimate bodhicitta. To give all that I can to returning again and again and again, to constantly make these aspirational prayers and to constantly do whatever practice is necessary to return again and again in order to bring the Dharma, the teachings as to how to plant virtuous seeds to all sentient beings. And, you know, you can count on that's what I'm going to be doing for a very long time. My prayer has always been, may I be the last. May I be the very last. May my eyes see everyone liberated. That's the prayer of a bodhisattva. And that kind of practice, that consideration that all sentient beings are equal, and since there are so many more of you than there are of me, you are so much more precious. So it's with that idea that we take up our practice. It's with that understanding that cyclic existence is flawed, that suffering is all pervasive, that all sentient beings are exactly equal and struggling to try to be happy. And that I cannot be free or happy without your freedom and your happiness, because we are the same. We are the same. So, having engaged on the path of the practice of ultimate bodhicitta, I feel that maybe I can look at my son. Well, he's a little bigger now, so I can't. Maybe I can look at my daughter. Maybe I can look at you and say, I will not abandon you. But still, that's not enough. Do you know why? Because even though all sentient beings have within them the seed of enlightenment, and equally so, and even though all sentient beings hold that Buddha seed and its very potential, not all sentient beings, because of their karmic interactions, have created the necessary karmic connections with the path or with a method that can lead to liberation. They simply don't have the connecting circumstances. They have all the potential, but no connection. Perhaps they have no connection with the path itself and no connection with anyone who is practicing the path. That's very common, more common than you think. That to me is unthinkable. To have the seed for liberation and never meet with the teaching, never meet with the method, never know how to give rise to happiness, how to be free, never even to have a clue how one should behave or how one should think in order to end suffering, in order to even stop one's own suffering. To me, that is the most unthinkable thing of all. And so, that's why I'm passing the baton on to you. That's why my greatest joy is administering to others the Bodhisattva vow. Because there are a lot more of you than there are of me, and the chances are you have connection with a lot more sentient beings than I do. Lord Buddha says that we have existed since time out of mind. So many lifetimes in so many different forms. We have formed just uncountable connections. You have formed connections with sentient beings that I don't have. So maybe I might have here the method for you, but you've got the friends. So the greatest joy in my life, really, is to confer the ordination of the Bodhisattva on others, which is what we did yesterday. To invite you to practice both mundane, ordinary bodhicitta, that is the kind of generosity that we can ordinarily practice in our world, and to practice that ultimate supreme bodhicitta. Accomplish your path. Accomplish the means by which we can attain liberation, and make that commitment to return again and again for their sake. There are some sentient beings who, having the Buddha seed, know no one but you, have a karmic connection with no one but you. And your connection to the path is their only hope. Your connection to enlightenment is their only chance. And so I ask you, every time that you move a little closer to really working at your path and moving through the stages of practice, and every time that you accomplish anything of the Buddha Dharma, any even small making an offering, please dedicate that effort to the liberation of, and salvation of all sentient beings, and remember those that have hopes of you, those ones who have no connection but you. You are all they have. For their sake, you must practice. You must achieve liberation. You must learn to understand the faults of cyclic existence and learn to engage in the activities that bring about liberation. Not only for yourself, but for their sake. This constant awareness of the others, this mindfulness is essential, not only for our practice, but for our happiness. Haven't you ever noticed, even in your own experience, that people that are completely self-absorbed are the most miserable people on the face of this earth? There it is, right there in front of you. You've seen it with your own eyes. And even when we ourselves have gone through a period of extreme self-absorption, when we come out of it and we think about anybody else and what they're going through or what they're experiencing, it kind of blows us away and we go, wow, where was I? And you realize that during that time, the mind is tight, it's crowded, it's inflamed, desire. Oh, you never get a moment's peace when you're self-absorbed. All you can think about is what you need next. You never get a moment's peace. You can't even get any rest. You don't even leave yourself alone for that long. It's like when you look out at the world, you see, people look like T-bone steaks to you. Who am I going to eat today? And that desire keeps us wanting, that self-absorption. There is no happiness in that. No happiness in that. And so to practice this supreme generosity, this ultimate bodhicitta, this mundane bodhicitta, not only is this the way to liberation, not only is this the way to leave this world a better place than you found it, not only is this the way to practice as the Buddha has taught, but it's also the way to your personal happiness. Oh, but don't tell that to a person who is in the middle of self-absorption, because they've got problems and they want you to solve them. But if we can get past that point to where we have just a moment of clear view, perhaps we can understand that in that state of ego cherishing, neediness, and constantly trying to get what you need, there is no practice. That is the opposite of the way of liberation. One's going deeper and deeper into suffering and samsara. And so I beg you not only to practice for your own happiness, but to practice for their sake as well.
Thank you very much for being here today, and I hope that was helpful for you, and I hope you keep coming back. Um, we do these teachings by Jetsunma every Wednesday at 7:30 and Sundays at 11. Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time and Sundays at 11 a.m. Also Eastern Time. Um, in addition, there's a lot that we are still doing online. You know, we got really going online during the COVID days, and we've continued. So there's a meditation for you on Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. as well as in person. We really hope you come. Um, Spend a little time at the temple, spend a little time on the grounds, and it's open from dawn to dusk. The prayer room is open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So come, come, come. Meanwhile, we have Medicine Buddhas on Facebook, a short Medicine Buddha practice. It's condensed, it's in English. Jetsunma created this during the COVID times, but it's useful for all times because we always know somebody who's sick or in need of prayers. And it's every evening at 7 p.m. on Facebook. Soak offering, we do every day. It's basically a food offering ceremony. It's an offering to purify the karma, to create the actions of generosity, and it's really potent in terms of removing obstacles and creating merit. So that's every day, Monday through every day. I'll just leave it right there, and the time changes depending on the day. So my advice is go check out the calendar. The calendar on tara.org, which is our website, is, if you just go to tara.org, scroll to the bottom of the page, and you will find a link to it right there. It's easier than trying to remember and copy that long one that's on the chat. So you can get all the information you need on that calendar. You can tell, we do update it when things change, which is sometimes at the last minute. Actually, it's mostly at the last minute. So, so go and check it out. Click on the event, and you will find not only wherever it is being broadcast online, what venue it's going on, what the codes are to get there and get into it, and also a link to the practice, in fact, that we're doing. So you are right with us when you join in, and we're always happy to have you. Next, let's see. That's enough for now. The Jetsunma's biggest activity right now these days has been Buddhist relief, and it's just really actually quite amazing. She has gone from one giant box a day of food to tons, and there's lots and lots happening there. So check it out. I put it in the chat, so you want to, and you can do that. And if you want to make an offering to Jetsunma, you can also do that. Her PayPal address is jetsumagift@gmail.com. So please do whatever it is you're moved to do, and check all these things out. If you're moved to make offerings or to come and volunteer, every way is helpful, and it's pretty impressive and pretty exciting to be part of making so many people feel better. So hope you join us, and come on back on Wednesday night for this next teaching. Thanks again.